Okay, this is a woolly bugger pattern. It also is a pattern that I got from Bill Sheese from Henry's Lake. He's one of my idols as a still water guy, so but you can do a lot of variations on this. This chenille material that I gave you is black and beaver tan chenille. That's where it gets its name from. But you know, when you do this, it doesn't look like much, but in a lot of the waters of the West, there is an evening caddis, and it's a huge caddis fly. And as an adult, it has a almost chartreusey green body, but the nymph coming up in the water has a mottled black and tan body like that. So midsummer, this is a killer pattern, and I do it with a number of different variations. I tie it with a brown tail, I tie it with a black tail, I tie it with an olive tail, I tie it with a brown hackle, I tie it with a black hackle, I even tie some with a purple hackle. There's a variation of it we call the black and beaver purple, and you put some purple UV crystal flash in that pattern. But, kind of the same idea as the RC fly. A lot of these patterns you can make your own little variations, and surprisingly what difference it can make what you do with the fly. Well, this one, just because we had more brown hackle than we had black hackle, I gave everybody a piece of black hackle. I think everybody should have a piece of black marabou, and we're just going to stay with, I'm going to tie with black thread, but you've all got olive thread spun up, and you can do it with olive, no harm, no foul. So again, we're going to dress the hook just like we did with the RC flies. And you'll see, I mean, once you learn the basics of tying flies, the rest is just the recipe for the materials. It's real, you know, you've got the simple steps down now. You can tie just about anything there is out there in the world. Some of them get a little more complicated than others, but all the technique is basically the same. I'm going to do that. I'm going to coat my thread with a little glue, and I like. I mean, this is just a Wapsi water-based head cement, and I like it for doing this because it has no odor to it at all. Some people think that the head cement can, in real calm water, can be smelled by the fish, and it puts them off. So again, we'll build this from the back. I'm going to put my black marabou tail on. You could put crystal flash in this if you want to. I tie a lot of them without any flash in it though, just because it makes it a little more subtle fly, but it's certainly something you can do. I also tie it with copper crystal flash as a lateral line, and we call that a white hot chocolate. And it works sometimes, doesn't it, Dave?
Yep.
No.
I'm not a big fan of real long tails. I typically tie my tails a little shorter than what most people say in the recipe book. Now, this fly has a few more steps to it than the other one does. So basically, the last thing to go on your fly, with the exception of your tail, is the first thing that you want to tie into wrap. Now, this is just a super extra small copper wire, piece of copper wire. I'm going to tie it in real good. You can tie it in partially and fold it over to have it not come out, but the way it's applied, it doesn't have a tendency to pull out nearly as easy. I'm just going to dangle that out the back. The next thing that's going to go on this fly is the hackle feather. And typically, I mean, the rule of thumb when you're tying a hackle feather, the length of that fiber should just about be equal to the gape, they call it. It's the space between the point of the hook and the barb, and you'll see that's pretty close. You can tie them longer, it gives more action to the fly. You can tie them shorter if you just want a real short leggy pattern, but that is the rule of thumb when choosing a hackle feather, is that the feather should be in it. I'm going to tie this one in from the butt end and move it towards the front because it's pretty much a flat fly. You can go the opposite direction, tie it in from the tip. There's two different things. When I tie this in from the butt end with the shiny side of the feather facing me and go forward, the fibers of that feather are going to point forward. And Bill Schiess's theory in doing this is that when you strip the fly, those fibers are going to make noise in the water. If you tie it in from the tip and go the other way, all the fibers will lay back and it looks more streamlined and prettier kind of, but you lose that sound factor in doing it. So
Is that what they call palmer?
yeah, palmer. Yeah. So this, and I'm tying in my butt. I stripped off about an 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch of the fibers off of that. Now I'm going to lay that right against the side of my body there and do 5 or 6 good wraps to tie that in. Okay. And last but not least, I'm going to take my Black and Beaver Tan chenille. And this is available in various sizes. This is the small, and I kind of like the small for this size fly. Sometimes I'll use a medium, but it makes the body about twice as thick. They also make it in a large and even a really extra large size. So depending on the size fly you're tying, you can match the body with the hook. So I stripped some of that, about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch of the fiber off of that. So I'm just going to tie in the thread there, and that's going to keep it from building up too big of a lump back here where I'm tying all this material in. Okay, now I'm going to run my thread all the way up to the behind where my head is going to be and let it dangle. Then I'm going to take my chenille and carefully just one wrap next to the other, keeping good tension on it all the time I'm going forward. I'm not releasing the tension anytime. Just putting one wrap next to the other and moving forward. And if you're in the vise buying market, if you buy a rotary type vise, you can hold the chenille in your hand and spin the vise, and it makes it a little more uniform. It's a nice thing. I would definitely not go out and buy a vise if you think you're going to be tying on an ongoing basis that isn't a rotary. Then I'm going to make 4 or 5 wraps behind that material and a couple in front. Just lock it in and then trim it off right down close to the line. Again, make sure you're holding it up and your thread is hanging down so you don't accidentally cut your thread. Next, I'm going to take my hackle feather and I'm going to wrap it the same way, only I'm going to separate each wrap about maybe a 1/16, between an 1/8 and a 1/16. You can do this, I mean, you can change the entire look of the fly by how far you spread your wraps. I'm going to come around and hold that up, do a few wraps behind. The wire got in the road here. Front. Trim that off. Now I'm going to, as you notice, when we're typically, everything you wrap on, you're wrapping away from your body and over the top. This is one of the exceptions to that rule. We're going to counter wrap this wire so that it goes back. The sole purpose of the wire is to lock in that hackle feather, especially when you're fishing for cutthroats. Their teeth are so sharp. I mean, you can catch one fish and a tooth will break that hackle, and if it's not tied down, it will completely unravel and your fly's junk. And if you counter wrap with wire or with thread, and as you do this, if you take your thread and just work it back and forth, it'll work its way down in through those fibers without mashing them all down. If I was to just wrap forward with that, I would lose about half of that hackle in the process, squishing it all down. get it up and hold as many fibers back as I can, and get a couple of wraps there on the head, and hold it up, wrap it. I'm going to trim that. Whenever you're working with wire, these are really, they're expensive and they're real fine tip scissors. I've got a piece of junker scissors from old days that I've used, but even with those, whenever you're cutting wire, you want to cut way back in the crotch. It'll ruin the tips of your scissors. So you can spend $25 for a good pair of scissors and they can be junky in a few cuts of wire. So it's best if you use an old pair, but if you want to use the ones you're tying with, make sure you cut deep into the crotch. I'm going to hold those fibers back with my fingers as best I can and build a little bit of a head. I'm going to trim those loose fibers out of the way and then whip finish. Remember, hook down, go around the back, put the intersection next to the fly. Tip it forward off things, slide back. And I would strongly suggest that you go home and put a hook or two in a vise and just run a lot of whip finish knots. Once you really get it in your head, it's no big deal, but until you do, it's just something that will fight you until you're through. All right, there is a black Beaver Tan.